The San Francisco sky cracked open the night Nina Carter went into labor. Rain lashed against the emergency room windows like fury unleashed, each droplet exploding under the harsh fluorescent lights. The air was thick with humidity, antiseptic, and the sharp rattle of gurney wheels that echoed like panic in motion. Nina gripped the metal armrest of the wheelchair, her knuckles pale against her skin. Another contraction tore through her, sudden and violent like a rogue wave. She clenched her jaw, swallowed her scream. "Not now! Not here!" "How far apart are the contractions?" the nurse asked, her voice warped by the chaotic hum of the ER. 3 minutes, Nina gasped, her breath shallow and erratic. Around her wrist, a worn silver bracelet caught the clinical light. It was the only thing she had kept from a past she thought was buried, a promise shattered like glass underfoot. The automatic doors whooshed open, letting in the scent of rain and the Friday night madness of the city. But for Nina, the world had shrunk to one singular moment. Pain, fear, and the one question she couldn't silence: can I really do this alone? Logan had vanished 3 months ago, leaving behind unanswered texts and a forwarding address that led nowhere. Her mother had called the baby a mistake she'd regret, and her sister? Across the country. "We need to get her upstairs now," the nurse shouted. "Her water just fully broke. Fetal heart rate's dipping." Nina nodded faintly, tears blurring into sweat. She had always believed she was strong. But right now, being wheeled down a blinding hallway, she felt stripped bare, exposed in a way no one had prepared her for. The elevator creaked upward, floor by agonizing floor. Each number lit up like a countdown to something irreversible. When the doors opened on the 28th floor, labor and delivery. She braced herself for the truth that awaited her there. She was going to give birth. Alone. Delivery room 3127 was flooded with sterile white light as Nina's gurney was wheeled in. Everything moved in fast forward, the beeping of fetal monitors, hurried footsteps, nurses exchanging clinical terms she couldn't quite grasp. But all of it faded the moment she heard that name. Page Dr. Monroe, Stat. Nina's heart stopped. No, it can't be. Not him. Not tonight. She turned her head in panic, cold sweat prickling her skin, not from pain this time. The door burst open, and time shattered. Dr. Elias Monroe entered in crisp blue scrubs, his dark brown hair tinged with gray at the temples. But his eyes, deep, impossibly blue, were unmistakable. The eyes that once promised her a future, that once made her believe in the impossible. Elias froze the moment he saw her. His clipboard slipped from his hand. "Nina." Just one word, soft as a sigh, heavy as history. She turned her face away, heart twisting. He couldn't see her like this. Disheveled hair, pale skin, body trembling. Nothing remained of the proud young woman who once dreamed of building a better world with him. "I'm Dr. Monroe," Elias said, his voice a practiced calm. "I'll be delivering your baby tonight." Another contraction crashed through her like a tidal wave. Nina let out an involuntary cry. Instinctively, Elias moved closer, placing a steady hand on her shoulder, his expression both clinical and kind. His touch, heartbreakingly familiar. "Don't," she whispered as the pain receded. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you still care." Elias hesitated. His eyes flickered. "Tonight, I'm your doctor. Nothing more. I'm here to make sure you and your baby are safe." "My baby," Nina said firmly, as if reaffirming a truth. The child who would grow up without a father, just like she had. A cycle repeating, a legacy of wounds passed down like heirlooms. And now, in this place where so many lives began, her own heart cracked open. Not from labor, but from the weight of a name, a glance, and a man who had once meant everything. This contraction came without warning, not like a crashing wave, but a dull, lingering ache that clawed its way through her, like a wound long buried being torn open again. Nina gritted her teeth, her whole body slick with sweat. She couldn't tell what hurt more, the labor or the loneliness creeping in beside it. Elias had just finished checking her vitals. "I'll be back in 15 minutes, he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. She watched the way his shoulders stiffened before he left. Only when the door clicked shut did she exhale, like she had finally been allowed to fall apart. The door opened again. A different presence entered. A woman in her 50s, white coat, hair streaked with silver, eyes both sharp and warm. Her name tag read Maria Delgado, RN. "Hi there," she said softly. "I'm Nurse Maria. Dr. Monroe will be back shortly, but I'll stay with you for now." Nina gave a slight nod, her throat tight with unshed words. She didn't need words to read what was unspoken. Years of delivering babies had taught her that not all pain in the room came from the body. "We used to know each other," Nina whispered between contractions. Maria nodded without pressing. "Want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps. Gives your mind something else to hold on to." Nina stared at the ceiling. In her mind, images flickered like an old film reel. A creaky dorm porch, the smell of late-night coffee, Elias reciting anatomy terms in that husky, half-embarrassed voice. "We met in college," she said slowly. "I was studying education. He was, obviously, pre-med. We dreamed about changing the world together." Maria adjusted the monitor calmly. "And then, the real world intervened?" Nina let out a dry laugh. "I was the daughter of a school nurse and a father who never stayed. Elias was legacy, born into medicine with a future pre-written. They never said it outright, but their eyes told me I wasn't enough." "And then he left?" Maria asked, without judgment. "He got into a residency on the East Coast, Johns Hopkins. That last night in Boston, he said he needed time to think, but the truth was, the choice had already been made. He didn't choose me." Another contraction hit, cutting her off. Maria grasped her hand, grounding her. When it passed, Maria asked softly, "Did you ever see him again after that?" "Once, 8 years ago. I was at an education summit in Chicago. He was giving a lecture on high-risk pregnancies." Nina smiled bitterly. "Fitting, right?" "Do you see you?" "I hid in the back row. He was wearing a wedding ring." Maria was quiet for a moment, then asked, "And since then, have you ever stopped loving him?" Nina looked down at the silver bracelet on her wrist, the only relic of what they once were, and didn't answer. Another contraction hit, stronger than any before. Nina screamed for the first time since arriving at the hospital. She had no strength left to hold back. Every cell in her body begged for release. "She's at 8 centimeters, Maria reported. Elias tightened the strap of his mask, his eyes never leaving Nina. "We're moving fast. Get ready for the pushing stage." Maria nodded and began preparing the instruments. Every movement in the delivery room fell into rhythm, precise, measured, like a silent symphony. Nina panted, barely coherent. "I don't know if I can do this." "You've been doing this for 7 hours, Elias said, his voice calm and steady. "You're almost there, and you're not alone." Nina looked at him, her eyes swollen and exhausted. Maybe, in that fragile moment, she believed him. Just a little. "The baby's moving down," Maria said. "Next contraction, I want you to push." Nina gripped the bed rail, her whole body trembling. Elias stood at her feet, his expression clinical, yet remarkably gentle. When their eyes met, she saw it, something cracking behind the surgical mask, a wound that had never really healed. "Long, steady push, Nina," Elias instructed. "Maria will count for you." The contraction came like a tsunami. Maria began counting. Nina gathered every ounce of strength, physical, emotional, spiritual, and pushed like she was giving birth to more than just a child. Between pushes, Nina caught glimpses of Elias' face, no longer just a doctor's gaze, but the eyes of the man who once held her under the Boston stars, whispering he'd stay, and didn't. "I see the head," Elias said, voice catching. "Dark hair, just like—" He stopped himself, but Nina heard it. Just like his. Tears spilled from her eyes, not just from pain, but from the sharp, undeniable truth. They had once dreamed of this baby, in another life, in another time. "Oh, more, Nina, your baby's almost here." Nina bore down with all she had left: strength, defiance, and a heart that had once been broken. Then, silence, a suspended moment in time, and then a cry, thin, shrill, and full of life. "It's a boy," Elias whispered. He lifted the baby in his gloved hands, his voice trembling, as if he believed in miracles for the first time. Maria placed the baby on Nina's chest, warm, damp, and perfect. Nina wrapped her arms around her son, her heart exploding in a wave of love she'd never known. All the loneliness, fear, and anger melted under the sacred weight of new life. "Hello, little one," she whispered through tears. "I'm your mama." Elias stepped back, giving mother and child space, but Nina caught his expression, raw, open, heartbreakingly human. He wasn't just seeing a patient, he was seeing the woman he had once loved, and the mother he now couldn't look away from. Night fell over the postpartum floor like a heavy quilt, thick, warm, and quiet. The room was lit only by a small bedside lamp, casting soft shadows on the pale walls. Nina didn't sleep. She couldn't. Baby Leo lay in the clear bassinet beside her, breathing in gentle wisps. Every rise and fall of his tiny chest made her own heart flutter. Everything was peaceful, except her. A soft knock at the door. Maria stepped in with the silence of someone who had witnessed hundreds of sacred moments like this. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked, checking the monitors, watching Nina carefully. "Like I got hit by a truck," Nina said with a weary smile. "But a really beautiful truck." Maria chuckled. "That's how most new mothers feel." Then she paused, pulling a chair closer. "Can I ask something? Not as your nurse, as a mother?" Nina nodded, her heartbeat quickening. "Dr. Monroe," Maria said gently, "there's more between you two, isn't there? More than you shared." Nina looked down at her hands, at the old silver bracelet. "He was my first love," she said, almost a whisper. "Actually, my only love. When he left, I told myself I'd learned my lesson, never love someone that much again." Maria nodded, eyes filled with understanding. "I thought if I was strong enough, good enough, I wouldn't need anyone. I could be a teacher, a mother, hold it all together. No one could hurt me again." "And now?" Maria asked softly. Nina glanced toward the bassinet. Leo stirred slightly, his lips twitching like he was dreaming. "Now I have Leo, and I can't let personal feelings distract me. I have to be the mother he needs, not a woman swayed by a man who showed up at the right moment." Maria didn't argue. She simply squeezed Nina's hand and stood. Just then, another gentle knock, this time Elias. He was out of scrubs, in a charcoal sweater and jeans. He looked younger somehow, or maybe just closer. "Sorry if I'm interrupting," Elias said, pausing at the door. "I just wanted to check in one last time before heading out." Maria exited quietly, leaving them alone. Nina sat up. She didn't know why her heart beat faster, but it did. "Leo's good," she said. "Thank you for everything." Elias nodded, his gaze moving to the bassinet. "You named him Leo Elias Carter?" She didn't answer. He already knew. "It wasn't random," Elias said, voice low. "That name." Nina clenched the blanket. "I don't know. Maybe habit? Maybe something I never really let go of." He looked at her for a long time, as if weighing his words. "Thank you for not forgetting," Elias whispered. "And I'm sorry for leaving." For the first time, Nina didn't look away. 3 days after giving birth, Nina was packing to leave the hospital. Maria helped fold Leo's newborn clothes, while Elias had stepped back into his role as doctor. Careful, kind, but more distant now. Maybe he was giving her space, or maybe he was waiting. She wasn't ready yet. Her phone rang, unknown number from Portland. Nina sighed, then answered. Nina, it's me. His voice was tentative. None of his usual charm, just a man trying to return to something he once abandoned. I know I don't deserve to call. You should hang up the second you hear my voice. But please, give me a minute. Nina said nothing. Her silence landed heavier than anger. I was scared, Logan admitted. When you told me you were pregnant, I thought my whole life would fall apart. The startup, the investors, the expectations, they all needed me to be the man who was unattached. And I didn't know how to be a father. So I ran, because that's what I do. And now? Nina asked, her voice flat. I can't stop thinking about you, about my son. For the past 3 nights, I've been lying alone in that sleek, empty apartment. And for the first time in my life, I felt something was really missing. Not success, not money, family. Nina breathed deeply. A part of her wanted to believe him. Another part still remembered all the quiet doctor's visits, all the fear she carried alone. We'll be home by 3. If you want to meet your son, come. Logan arrived at 3:05, holding fresh flowers, a small gift bag, and an unmistakable look of guilt. His eyes scanned the tiny third-floor apartment, the whole world now for Nina and Leo. She let him in, and when he saw Leo, something softened in his face, something real. God, he looks like you, Logan whispered. And maybe a little like me? He held his son for the first time. His hands shook. He fumbled, but he meant it. I'm sorry, he said, eyes not leaving Leo. I was wrong. I was a coward. But I don't want to keep being that man. Knock. Elias. He was dressed in a charcoal sweater, his expression serious but calm. Sorry to intrude. I just stopped by to make sure Leo's doing okay after discharge. Nina looked between the 2 men, one who ran and one who returned. Logan spoke first, tension in his voice. You're the doctor? Yes, Elias answered evenly. Are you something more? You don't get to ask that, Nina said, gently but firmly. You only have one question to answer. Will you stay, even without me? Logan bowed his head. I want to, but I need to learn how. Elias stepped forward, adjusting Leo's blanket without a word. He didn't interfere. He didn't compete. Nina looked at her son, and for the first time she felt sure. She knew who would show up without needing to be asked. After Elias left and the door clicked shut, the air in the room seemed to shift. Logan stood still for a moment, hands shoved into his pockets. He stared at Leo asleep in the bassinet, tiny lips puckered, little fists clenched, like he was holding on to the whole world. He's beautiful, Logan murmured, mostly to himself. Nina didn't answer. She remained by the bassinet, her gaze soft but steady. You've always been strong, Logan said, voice low. Even when you were pregnant, I could see it. You never needed anyone to hold you up, not even me. That was never a choice, Nina replied. It was survival. When someone walks away, you learn to stand alone. Logan nodded, turning slightly. He looked toward the window as if searching for the right word somewhere in the dark. Maybe. I convinced myself I could do this. Be a dad. Come back. Apologize. Do the right thing. But what? Nina asked calmly. But there's someone else, he admitted. Someone I met a few months ago. Things were messy when you told me. I tried to end it with her. Tried to come back. But last night I realized I don't want to end things with her. And I don't want to step into fatherhood. Not now. Silence stretched long between them. But there were no tears. Nina only nodded. Thank you for the honesty. That, at least, is better than silence. Logan looked at her, as if expecting a reaction. Anger, sadness, a plea. But nothing came. Just a woman who had already walked through the storm, and was still standing. You don't have to come back, she said gently like a blessing. Leo will grow up surrounded by love. He doesn't need someone who wasn't brave enough to stay. Logan nodded slowly and walked to the door. Before he stepped out, he turned back. as if expecting her to call him back. But Nina only smiled, a soft, final smile. When the door closed behind him, she exhaled, not from exhaustion, but release. She turned back, leaned over, and kissed her son on the forehead. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're going to be just fine." 2 weeks after coming home, Nina realized something. Sleeping like a baby was the biggest lie ever invented. Leo loved being awake between midnight and 4 a.m. Not because he was hungry, not because he was wet, just because tonight, Nina was spent. Her head throbbed. She had fed him, changed him, rocked him, and still he cried. She paced the living room in circles, holding Leo close, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Please, just tell me what you need," she whispered, voice cracking. Leo kept crying, mercilessly. Her phone rang. Elias Monroe. She answered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call, but I'm so tired. I don't even know if I'm doing this right." On the other end, Elias paused, then said, "I'm coming over. 20 minutes. And he arrived exactly on time, in a hoodie and jeans, like someone who had accepted that 3 a.m. calls were part of the job now. "May I?" he asked gently, holding out his arms. Nina handed Leo over, relief and defeat mingling in her chest. Elias held the baby with a confidence that stunned her. He began to sway, slowly, to some ancient rhythm only he seemed to know. Leo quieted gradually, his cries softening into tiny hiccups. "It's called the colic hold," Elias explained softly. "Sometimes they need specific motion to help calm their nervous systems." Nina sank onto the couch, eyes wet. "You're good at this." "I've just had practice. And 2 free hands," he said with a soft smile. "You've been doing it all alone for 2 weeks." "I thought I was strong," she murmured. "But now, I'm not so sure." Elias sat beside her, Leo snoozing on his shoulder. "No one stays strong all the time. But you're doing the hardest thing in the world, and you're doing it well. You just need a break." Nina looked at him. There was no distance now, not between doctor and patient, not between past and present, just 2 people trying to raise a life. "Thank you," she said quietly. Elias met her eyes. "I'll always be here when you need me." 3 weeks after giving birth, Nina's life began to find a rhythm. Slow, uneven, and never quite complete. The mornings were still rough, the nights still sleepless, but there was something new. Elias. He never asked, never pushed. He just showed up. With coffee, groceries she forgot to buy, or just arms willing to hold Leo so she could nap. They walked around the block most afternoons. No labels, no promises, just the stroller's quiet rumble on the sidewalk and 2 people learning how to exist side by side again. One cool afternoon, while Leo dozed in the stroller, Nina spoke. "Can I ask you something, honestly?" Elias turned. "About what? About why you left?" "Back then, the truth." He stopped, took a breath. "I think you already know. I want to hear it from you." He nodded slowly. "My parents didn't think you were enough. They never said it outright, but they made it clear, with looks, with silence at dinners, with questions like, 'Are you sure she's the right fit for the Monroe family?'" Nina gripped the stroller's handle. "And you agreed?" "No," he said immediately. "I loved you. But I was afraid. I was young and not strong enough to stand between you and them." Silence. Just the stroller wheels, rolling along. "Afterward," he continued, "I tried to find someone who did fit. I married Charlotte. My father approved, but I didn't." "Because of me?" "No," Elias said, looking into her eyes. "Because I wasn't myself without you." Nina took a deep breath. The breeze carried a hint of jasmine. Part of her still hurt, but another part, the one that had waited 10 years for this, was finally quieting. After a few moments of silence, she asked, "Did you ever love Charlotte?" Elias paused, His gaze drifted from the lake to the horizon. I thought I did, in a safe, convenient kind of way. He gave a hollow chuckle. She came from the same world as me. She knew how to sit at the dinner table with my parents without trembling, knew when to smile, when to stay silent. It all made sense. But it wasn't enough? Nina asked softly. Elias nodded. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't real. He stopped walking for a moment, then continued. We got married when I was 28. 2 years in, things began to cool. There were no big fights, just distance. She lived in charity galas, I lived in the OR. Any kids? Nina asked quietly. No, Charlotte didn't want them. She said the world was already too chaotic. No need to add more souls to the mess. I was angry then, but later I realized she was just being honest with her truth. I wasn't. Nina stayed quiet. Elias continued. We divorced 3 years ago, quietly, the same way we got married. No shouting, no custody battles. Just two people who didn't belong together anymore. And then what? She asked. And then I lived alone. Hospital, home, occasional conferences. But no matter what I did or where I went, my mind always circled back to you. Nina turned to look at him, her eyes wide. Elias didn't look away. I missed you, Nina. Not just the idea of you, but you. The way you laughed at books, the way you questioned everything. I even missed your anger, your stubbornness, the way you cried, never loudly, just quiet tears down your wrist. So real, it hurt. Nina inhaled deeply, the scent of freshly cut grass mixed with the crispness of autumn air, making her heart tremble. I tried to find you, Elias said, his voice softer now, after the divorce. I asked a few old friends, searched online, but you disappeared. No trace. Because I didn't want to be found, Nina whispered. After you left, I needed to disappear. I needed to start from zero. I erased everything. Photos, phone numbers, social media accounts. She hesitated. And then I met Logan, my eventual husband. Elias froze, eyes slightly wide. We were married for 7 months, she said evenly. He was kind, funny, but after the wedding, he started to vanish. Late nights, strange calls, broken promises. I knew there was someone else, but I stayed because I just wanted to be chosen, to be enough. When did you leave? Elias asked. At exactly 1 year. It wasn't dramatic. I just couldn't stay in a place where I was a placeholder. I deserved more than that. They fell into silence. Only the birds chirping and leaves rustling above them remained. Did you love him? Elias asked. I tried, but my heart had always lived somewhere else. Another pause. I was terrified to come back, Elias admitted, afraid I'd hurt you all over again. But when I found out you were giving birth alone, seeing you on that table, I wanted to scream that I was wrong. And now? She asked, her voice barely audible. Now, Elias said, I don't want to lose you again. Not for my parents, not for the past, not for my own cowardice. I want one thing, to walk beside you, even slowly, even if you're not ready. I'll wait. Nina looked down at the stroller. Leo was still fast asleep, his little chest rising and falling in rhythm. She gripped the handle, then turned to Elias. I'm not promising anything, but you can walk with me today, just today. Elias nodded, his eyes glassy. They continued walking. No words needed, because sometimes a nod is enough to mean, I forgive you. I'm not ready, but I want to try. 6 months passed like a long dream, sometimes breathtakingly beautiful, sometimes exhausting enough to make her want to give up. But Nina stayed, and so did Elias. She started teaching part-time at a small neighborhood elementary school where kids called her Miss Nina the Fun One and fought over who got to push Leo's stroller after class. On weekends, Elias often took her and Leo to the park. He'd bring a blanket, a few croissants, and a habit of snapping candid photos of ordinary moments. One sunny Sunday in June, they visited a community fair. game booths, ice cream trucks, string lights, and cheerful music. Leo giggled in Elias's arms, kicking wildly as he watched bubbles float in the air. Nina stood beside them, sipping lemonade, watching it all, and suddenly realized this wasn't a dream. It was real, a reality she had chosen. "Where are you going next?" she asked as they sat under a tree. Elias shrugged. "The hospital's opening a mobile clinic for underserved communities. I'm volunteering on Saturdays." "For Leo?" she asked. "For you, and because I need to do something right." Nina nodded. Her eyes lit up, not with surprise but with confirmation of something she had felt growing for a while. She stood, gently lifted Leo from his arms, placed him in the stroller, and turned back. "Here's one thing I've never done," she said, smiling. "What's that?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "I've never asked if you wanted to stay, not out of obligation, but because I choose you." He said nothing, but his eyes shone. "So," Nina said, shy but steady, "I choose you. This time, it's me choosing." Elias laughed, startled and deeply moved. He stood, pulled her into a hug as fairground music and children's laughter swirled around them. And for the first time in 10 years, they weren't lost anymore. They were two people who had found their way back. 1 year after Leo's birth, Nina stood in the kitchen, morning light pouring through the glass window, casting a warm glow across her face, peaceful, radiant. Leo sat on the floor, giggling as Elias played Papa Bear Attack in a silly, deep voice. What once felt like a dream was now her everyday life. Nina poured coffee, breathing in its familiar scent, then returned to the kitchen table where 3 mugs sat side by side, hers, Elias's, and a tiny plastic one with dinosaurs. She once believed family was out of reach, that pain had taught her joy was dangerous. But now, every morning she woke up to Elias curled beside her, his arm draped gently over her shoulder, Leo breathing softly in the crib nearby, and she knew she had found what her heart had once lost. Elias walked over and kissed her forehead, whispering, "It's his birthday today." "I remember," she smiled, "the cake's in the oven." He paused, then exhaled softly. "I have another gift." Nina tilted her head, her eyes already glistening, as if she knew, as if she had been waiting. Elias knelt. No flowers, no diamond sparkle, just a simple silver ring resting in his open palm. "I lost you once," he said quietly but firmly. "If you'll let me, I want to walk beside you. This time, no missed steps. Will you marry me?" Nina said nothing for a few seconds. Her eyes filled, not with hurt, but with something deeper. She nodded, "Yes." Leo clapped, instinctively, as if sensing something special had just happened. Elias slid the ring onto her finger, then rose and embraced her as soft music floated from the old radio. "My heart once got lost," Nina whispered, "but this time it didn't just find its way back." She looked at Elias, then at Leo, both her present and her future. Outside, the wind rustled the garden, carrying the sound of laughter and the scent of something sweet in the oven. Every ending is just the beginning of something new. And this time, she wasn't walking alone.